We probably covered when it happened the unfortunate situation with Brianna Ghey over there in the UK. She was a transgender teenager, like 16 years old, I think, and she was a lovely, bright girl. She had lots of hopes and dreams and positivity. She wasn't being bullied. She was well liked by her peers, but she was a little lonely and socially awkward. A very happy child, though, generally, like a very happy person. There were a couple classmates of hers who were talking about luring her into a friendship and doing some kind of harm to her. And they were talking about also potentially victimizing other people. None of those names were released in any of the information that I was covering during the prosecution presenting their case, which we covered previously. But they ended up deciding to victimize Brianna. There's a teenage girl and a teenage boy who are both involved in this. And they've both been, their names and their faces were being kept from the, kept from the media during the trial, but now they've been released because they've been convicted and they've been sentenced as well. So they've been convicted and sentenced. They were guilty of her murder and they're serving pretty long prison terms, which I think is as close to justice as you can get in a system where that's how you do justice. Like, I guess that's the best case outcome we could have hoped for. I guess you would have hoped for life, but because they're 16, the convicted murderers were 16, that might be why it's like their prison terms are 20 years and 22 years respectively. Yeah, the scary thing is that you can't predict people's behavior. Like, the girl of these two teenagers was pretending to try to be Brianna's friend while meanwhile texting this boy. Her name's Scarlet, his name's Eddie. So she was texting him about her relationship with Brianna, and she tried to poison Brianna. I mean, she succeeded in poisoning Brianna with, I think, some like Advil, ibuprofen, something like that. And it made Brianna very sick and she threw it all up. But that was like, she was trying to poison her, murder her fully, and she just didn't succeed in killing her. And then they came up with this plot to lure her out in public by pretending to want to hang out as friends and then basically stabbing her a bunch. And they did that. And now she's dead. And so these people have been convicted of her murder. And I wanted to look at some of the coverage of that, see, if there's any additional information. Having covered this in detail, there's not a lot that I feel I could add at this point. So I want to see what the judge said. So obviously it's good that they've gotten their terms. So I guess they've been handed a mandatory life sentence, ordered them to serve a minimum of 20 and 22 years respectively before they could be eligible for parole, according to the AP. They would have faced longer minimum terms if they were over the age of 18, and they will be transferred to adult prisons when they turn 18. Neither showed a visible reaction upon being sentenced. The judge said, "You will only be released if in the future it is decided you no longer present a danger. You both took part in a brutal and planned murder, which was sadistic in nature, and a secondary motivation was hostility to Brianna because of her transgender identity." Yeah, like looking back at the texts between them, they were calling her it, they were talking about her transness, and it was part of why they targeted Brianna, for sure. This isn't important, but how did these people find each other? Like, how do you broach the topic, let's go harm someone for real? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I'm sure that they went to school together, but I don't know how exactly you get into that conversation with someone. The girl also claimed to have a crush on Brianna, so this is also like weird chaser behavior. I think that's fair to be on the lookout for that. So the judge declared that transphobia was a part of the reason. Like, it was at least a secondary motivation. I think the girl is the one who is getting the longer sentence. Yeah, the young woman is the one who's getting the longer sentence because the judge says to her, "Scarlet, your motivation was to act out your fantasies," having claimed that she enjoyed killing this teenage girl. Let's see what else there is in here. The dad, Brianna's dad, speaks very strongly and basically condemns the killers and says, like, no amount of time spent in prison will be enough for these people. He was, looking forward to continuing to flesh out his relationship with his trans daughter. He was a good supportive dad who was, happy to have a trans daughter. I hate prisons, but I hope they stay in them forever. Right. So long as we're doing prisons, I don't think that these people should be part of society. Just so long as we're doing this way. They have sociopath dar. It's like gaydar for sociopaths. That's how they find each other. I wonder if this is also a problem of the whole issue we have in the US, at least, of schools being understaffed, too many kids in there. Like, is this it is a mental health concern, right? That these kids fantasized about harming people. Like, why did no one notice that they were clearly not very well adjusted? Like, it can't be that the only expression of being poorly adjusted human beings was them chit-chatting to each other over text message. Would something like more attention, like more available resources to see what was going on? And then, like, yeah, of course, the whole, we want to improve the messaging around trans people. We want there to be more acceptance and stuff like that. So we're going to continue working on those things. But these individual people are still going to have this problem of hatred because there's still going to be that contingent in society for a while yet. So what do you do? How do you intervene on this? How do you address this before it gets to this point? Frankly, if any of the parents of these two kids had been checking to see what kind of messages their kids were exchanging, that would have probably made a pretty significant difference as well, because there was a long string of evidenced text messages. These two teenagers talking about hurting people, not just Brianna, but yes, planning to hurt her specifically and talking about attempting to poison her and stuff. Neither of them had been in trouble with police before. So yeah, here's another quote from a different article. This is from the BBC. The judge added that the messages sent by the boy were transphobic and dehumanizing, adding that he, quote, undoubtedly displayed hostility to Brianna based on her transgender identity. It's possible more attention could have helped, but there's always the chance that people slip through the cracks when you affirm a right to privacy and give kids a chance to grow as people. I feel like there's a balance, right? I feel like as a parent, your kid just cannot have unfettered access to the internet. Like, you can't. Like, my parents are not very attentive, and I found out because we were just talking about it, and she happened to be comfortable telling me that, like, my, at the time, 15-year-old younger sister was having like an adult solicit nudes from her and like harassing her about it. And I was like, block him right now. Like, pull out your phone right now and do it now while I'm standing here. You, as a parent, you have to be at least somewhat involved. You have to know who your children are talking to. You should know what content they're consuming and like what they're thinking about on a regular basis. And you can accomplish that without invading their privacy unnecessarily. You can discuss like, listen, I need to, for your safety, know what's going on. If you're talking to someone, you might not be aware of the red flags that I'm aware of. Someone might be preying on you online. Like, you need to regularly check in with me and maybe like have a consensual show me what's in your phone kind of situation or something. Like, I truly think that today's parents are wildly negligent. Like, I know some teenagers who have had actual like straight up actual neglect, but I also think that many teenagers and people in their 20s nowadays had upbringings where they were being pretty profoundly ignored. It's like the parents are making sure that the kids are fed, the parents are making sure that the kids are going to school, but there's basically no real teaching, there's no real discussion, and that's part of why the public school system does need to address things like consent and does need to address things like how to balance your pocketbook and things like this. It's sort of expected that our parents know these things and will teach us, but no one taught my dad how to save money or budget correctly or like how to invest money wisely. I learned that in my high school econ class. Like, I didn't learn a lot of necessary skills because my parents didn't have them. Completely correct on not allowing unfettered internet access. We're at a crossroads in humanity regarding technological advancement and how future generations should be raised. Yeah, you've got the Andrew Tates of the world radicalizing boys to being hateful toward women and domineering and like awful. I don't think that you should snoop on your kid's shit, but I think that you should have honest conversations with your kid. And if your kids are weirdly obsessed with serial killers like these kids were, I feel like you should have known that before they were even talking to each other. Like, well, how? Okay, that's a thing that you should probably have your kid checked up about. If your kid is like weirdly into true crime and serial killers, like, okay, when adult women do it, it's weird enough. But if your teenager is doing it, unfettered internet access did give me educational resources my parents wouldn't have approved of, on the other hand, like about evolution. We can be thankful that these Christian homeschoolers don't know how to set up networks that prevent their kids from Googling the word evolution. Media literacy should be part of the school. It usually is. It's called fucking English class. That's media. That's the media literacy class. It's your English class. Not just evolution. Most public schools don't have adequate sex education, even in blue states. So internet can be helpful for that, but it's also really tricky. Yeah, of course. Like I say, there's a healthy balance. I think even as a progressive parent who is otherwise mindful of consent and privacy, you can overstep on the consent and privacy stuff. There is such a thing as you having like too much access to your kids' stuff, even the most well-meaning of parents. But yeah, like having a mixture, like who your kid is talking to for the most part, what they're thinking about, what media they're consuming. I think the most important part of this is being a figure in your life that your kids can trust. True. But if your kid is trying to commit murder, obviously they're not gonna I don't know, is like the lack of a trusting relationship between the parent, are we gonna psychoanalyze that's why these kids became weirdly sociopathic about hurting this girl? My mom would not be letting me talk to other queer people. Yeah, you would have to be savvy, for sure. I'm not saying that kids are not still gonna have to hide things. Before the age of the internet, my parents would read my mail and they would read my diaries. I got in the habit of not keeping a diary for many years due to their intrusion. I had zero privacy as a kid. Yeah. If your parents are really determined to overstep those consent boundaries for privacy, then you don't have the right to stop them for the most part. I think most kids with unfettered internet access don't end up murdering anyone, though. Okay, and also to be clear, I want to I feel like this has gotten away from me a little bit because I don't think I was initially trying to say I did mention unfettered internet access, yes, but in this instance, one of the things that I want to focus on is who are they talking to? Yeah, and the internet is the medium through which they're talking to people, right? But it's not just what are they doing on the internet in general. I think most access to the internet is probably going to be a good thing, but it's about who are they speaking to and what are they speaking about. The curtains were blue caught on as an anti-intellectual way for kids to complain about their English class. So I wonder how many people complain about not being taught skills they were too obstinate to acquire when it was being taught to them. I don't know. Yeah, it's do people actually care? Do people complain about not being taught those skills, or do they seem to me to be not interested in having any skills regarding media consumption? I think that the curtains were blue is the kind of mentality that results in Dan and Dave ruining the end of Game of Thrones. That they were like, whatever, themes are for 8th grade book reports. No, actually, this is a very important thing about storytelling, as a matter of fact. I guess it's worth pointing out as one last thing on this, that even the Daily Mail had to concede that Brianna Ghey was killed for being trans. Was killed for being trans. Teenage murderers are jailed, could face even longer in prison, blah, blah, blah. So when the judge says it outright, that her status as being transgender was part of it, even the Daily Mail can't ignore. It feels like there isn't a good middle ground. I'm hearing so many stories of people whose parents were obtrusive and unacceptably in your private matters versus parents who clearly are not paying literally any attention to what their kids are doing. It's the thing that I'm proposing, that you should have a healthy transparency with your teenager about what they're up to and who they're talking to. I don't think that most parents are doing that. But did they concede that killing people for being trans is bad? True, I don't know. I didn't read the article. Hi, thank you so much to all of my patrons, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvag, Amanda B., Michelle Frateroli, Michelle Winter, Wellington Marcus, Danielle McDonald, DZXN, Suzanne Maynard, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Jamie Jam, Pasnell Infinity, Nova, Elizabeth Bartell, Sojo, Sarah A., Athiet, Kevin Young, Celeste, Desi Quiche, Liam Hodgson, Mr. Atheist, and Ella V. Nobody.